like Diligent Note Taker Lightning Bloom starts at the beginning for Shaman, just to try and get as much pressure down as possible. There are, of course, handily pointed out by the Mulligan, as always, Earth Elementals in Gaby's list, which does change his early curves. Like, we've seen a couple of people already go for a big Lightning Bloom into the Spirit Alpha plays, which, you know, just generally puts a bunch of small, low health minions on the board. That gets cleaned up by Fire Sale, whereas Earth Elemental, yes, it can get frozen, but in terms of actually long-term clearing it off the board, it's a lot trickier for Mage to deal with generally.
Right. Yeah, just absolutely ton of health, where Mage is pretty used to being able to just, you know, brain freeze here, just throw a first flame over there, kill 2 minions and have a great time, but obviously not the case against a big boy like Earth Elemental. Gaby is going to mulligan away, though. He didn't have any blooms. I think if he had 1 bloom on offer, he would then seriously consider keeping the Elemental here. Bunnyhoppor, though, going to be taking his time over this one, and a little bit surprised. I don't think either of these 2 cards are that great, but maybe Bunnyhoppor just thinking through the game plan as well.
Yeah, almost a throwback at this point, right? Players like Bunnyhoppor and Yala. Again, I was talking to about this with you just before we came on air. Feels like the new breed of European Grandmasters, the players that we've been seeing doing very well recently. You know, Blaze, Gaby, Frenetic, they're very fast, instinctive players. RDU, Casey, you know, all these players who've kind of had success in recent seasons. They are all very rapid, and of course European GM has this reputation of being slow and ropers and lots of life coaching going along, but there's a few players who certainly do still fly the flag for that style, and Bunnyhoppor is absolutely one of them, looking for a big return to form here.
Already an early discover here. I think Thanos is definitely the middle ground, right? It's a bit of spell damage, but more importantly, more card draw, which is generally what you're after. Not really too bothered about the spell damage this early in the game.
Yeah, there's some matchups there where when you're offered a mini mage, you would just take it because it's generally just such persistent spell damage throughout the whole course of the game that some decks can't deal with. But Shaman, not one of those decks that has those problems because of Perpetual Flame clearing up quite easily, as well as any number of generated cards that can do the job as well.
No littering! The storm is in.
Gaby just going maximum on board and unlocks the mana crystals, of course, so he won't be overloaded for this turn. And it's not really the best version of that turn you can do, but it's good enough, right? He's going to have 3 mana next turn. He's put forward a pretty reasonable sized board, and Bunnyhoppor needs pretty specific cards to clear up all of this on this turn. And again, it's as early as ever in the game, right, for Bunnyhoppor not to have those cards. So reasonable gambit here from Gaby.
Yeah, good draw on the flow as well for Bunny, of course. It's a little bit awkward because it doubles him up on Arcane on this particular round of the quest. But since he has Fire Sale locked up and loaded, ready to go, firstly for a board clear and secondly for a fire spell, I think that means he's not really interested in casting Ignite this turn. You can imagine, right, if he didn't have another fire spell in hand, he might want to cast Ignite just to get the fire spell ticked. But also, if he didn't have the board clear lined up, he might just want to take some damage off the board so he doesn't get raced down too quickly by this board state. But with the fire sale in hand, not really too many problems for Bunnyhoppor right now.
Yeah, I actually think Gaby would have loved the heal totem that turn, right? Just to push the Slugger back up to full health, which means it doesn't die to just a brain freeze or just a fire sale and so on that we can see. And speaking of fire sale, I think, although it might not feel great to spend a whole turn on this, it's very hard not to fire sale this board and just say, go away. Bunnyhoppor's already on 17 health. He just needs to get rid of this and then start pushing forward himself.
Again, with a distinct lack of frost spells in hand, Bunny is a little bit stalled on 2 different fronts, really, because firstly, the frost spells are what he needs to progress his quest at this point, but secondly, also, frost spells are generally what you need in the mid-game with Mage because they allow you to just stall the board out, right, and ignore it and get on with your quest completion. So the fact that Gaby's going to continue to be able to play a couple of big minions here in the coming turns with Earth Elemental, and hopefully then followed quite rapidly by some charge calls off the top from his perspective, the lack of frost spells might just come back to bite Bunny fairly quickly. But he does have that Spring Water in hand. He does have a Pexis Blast for a little bit of a tempo swing as well.
I'm just wondering if Gaby just has to bite the bullet a bit here and just play Fireheart and pick a spell. He's chosen to hold back, get more value, and also, most importantly, not hit that totem. And that, on the basic level, might look weird. Oh, he's just floated all the mana. But if he doesn't play a minion, it's much harder for Bunnyhoppor to progress his quest with the only thing he needs left, which is, for example, the flurry he has just drawn. So, nice little play there from Gaby, just to hold back.
Yeah, you see the difference, right? Because he did press totem last turn, he didn't press totem this turn. Well, what's the difference, right? Well, you pointed it out. Totem actually had upside for Gaby on the previous turn, where he could have got a healing totem, played around Fire Sail, Brain Freeze, all of these sources of 3 damage that the opponent has available. On that turn, there's no real upside to a totem in that position, so he just decided to turn it down and deny the targets on board, as you were saying.
It's important to keep an eye on that Instructor Fireheart as well for Gaby, because I imagine it also won't be a play next turn, but it is one of those cards that can just grab wins almost by itself in the late game, because you have that mana knocking around, right, to be able to just pretty consistently chain at least 2 to 3 different spells from that, and that can make a huge difference in this matchup.
Very important draw on the spell. Doesn't hit a second Frost spell, so he's still found a little bit short. He does have Arcane Intellect, though. If again,
just go Stewart. I wouldn't hate it.
And just play it this turn, you mean?
Yeah, just dig for a Frost.
I can see it. I think if he takes a cheaper one, he can just throw in the Arcane Intellect anyway, which he needs an Arcane spell this cycle at this point anyway, so I think probably in his best interest.
Runs out on me.
Okay, second Flurry is a big deal. Yeah, of course. I mean, you want to cast the fire spell before the frost spell, right? It's important to melt the ice before you then cast the ice again. That's just how elements work. We all know that.
He's going to hold the flurry, though. I was going to raise this, right? Like, does he need to proc it this turn? I think in some cases people would proc it this turn, but it's definitely not needed, right? There's only real upside because it's a 0 mana spell. It's not like he's floating mana to not play this frost spell, right?
Yeah, I was going to say I'm a little bit confused as to why Bunny was reaching for the flurry that turn, because it doesn't actually really achieve anything. It would be different if you had, say, like Hot Streak, First Flame in your hand, right? And then you'd actually spend that turn cycling through the ice proc, discover a spell, Hot Streak, start cycling through the fire on the next proc as well. But it just wasn't really going to achieve anything for his hand to play the flurry one turn earlier there.
Oh, flurry looks all right to me.
He has Arcane Fire in hand with flow number 2, neither Fireball or Ignite. I'd even be able to get away with launching one face at this point, considering he has Flurry lined up.
Yeah, and he's already seen the Elemental, of course, has procced from Gaby's secondary quest progression, and that's normally the extra minion you might not necessarily always expect because it is procced from the quest. It is outside of Feral Spirit. There's not really too much that would punish Bunny for doing that, and he has a Fire Sail. So.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
I was just going to say, like, Feral Spirit isn't even really a punish.
Yeah.
And you're just fairly happy to Fire Sail and Flurry, and you still have mana to drop the Dawn Grasp alongside all that, right? Like, because you can just Flurry and then that procs Dawn Grasp, honestly, any size of board is really not a factor, because he will always have the ability to go Flurry, play Dawn Grasp, and then Fire Sail for 1,000,000 afterwards.
I wonder.
A little bit awkward here for Gaby as well. He could just double Serpentine and just say, let's go wide, and, well, there's his flurry's gone, which is a completely reasonable plan. The issue with Fireheart, which against 3 mana isn't bad to play with Instructor Fireheart, is I don't even know what Gaby will be looking for this turn. His minions are frozen, so buffs like Wind Fury do nothing. And then also, it's not like he was in burn range, right, of like the really crazy draws you can get to just randomly burn your opponent down with that Fireheart. So yeah, I think I do like just double Serpentine, push Bunnyhoppor down to 11, and that means that maybe Gaby gets the job done if one of these minions can attack.
Or having hit the Earth Ellie here with the Flurry, I wonder whether Bunny will take the aggressive line of going Cram Session instead, and he is going to. Ton of damage in hand here already. Refreshing Spring Water uncastable. Ice Barrier is huge, though. Yeah, there's just so much safety in his deck, right, to go with this play. When you consider the ice barriers, the first flames that would cost 0, the brain freezes that would cost 0, I think this play has a massive upside. Oh, huge.
I think he has to play the ice barrier though, right?
Yes, I think so. Well.
Close enough anyway.
Yeah, Ignite only dealing 7 on the far left.
Brain freeze barrier seems absolutely fine to me.
6 mana, I believe, for Gaby this turn, which means it's just Brukan Bolt. Not going to be enough to get there. He would have needed attacking minions and no ice barrier to be able to push lethal here. Yeah. Not looking like this is going to be enough. Looking like Bunny has successfully locked up game 1, as you would expect. As we keep saying, this is a very, very good matchup for the Mage overall.
Gonna go digging with Fireheart just to see.
So you bolt, you could get overdraft there, and then you bolt face again and you overdraft, but I just don't, where's the rest of the damage coming from at that point? You can't get Bloom though, that's the thing.
Oh,
right? You can't get Bloom on Fireheart.
Of course, yeah.
So I guess cut back one step on what I said. One of those steps is a guidance instead, and then the guidance gives you like another lightning bolt and a Bloom. Okay. Oh no.
So close.
There is little time.
Was it right? I think Gaby missed a small out there, did he not? If he'd taken the guidance and hit like exactly Bloom Bolt?
I guess so, yeah.
I wonder.
Oh, close.
Yeah. Knows it's going to be Ice Barrier, and then also knows that with all the card draws, the sheer number of cards in hand and the cards still not played yet from Bunny means that he will just be very, very dead next turn anyway. Very close from Gaby there, and already you can see what, like, imagine a world where a slightly sooner Brukan managed to come down. The Overload just worked out a bit better, maybe with Blooms being drawn. Really, really close matchup, and one you don't often see of the Shaman versus Mage, but Bunnyhoppor did get the win with the Mage, so maybe a sigh of relief right at that last end turn there, but he gets the win, wins the favoured matchup, and then he'll have to just prepare for the counter queue now. But as often is the case in Last Hero Standing, when you lose the favoured ones is when you're in the big trouble, because it all spirals out of control normally from there.
Yeah, and I like you talking about, earlier Brukan there, because I think that's kind of a hidden benefit of those huge Diligent Note Taker starts that I was talking about earlier. When you go Note Taker, Bloom, Coin, Earth Elemental or something in the early game, right? Like, not only is that a ton of pressure, but it's also a ton of quest completion immediately. So that means you're less, because you got the extra Bloom off your Diligent Note Taker, you're suddenly just so much closer to that Brukan that maybe that does mean Brukan comes down one turn early, and maybe your Earth Elemental has got to hit face one time, and that means that you're just looking at Brukan, Lightning Bolt, and a Serpent Shrine Portal to end the game at the end of it all. So those huge explosive starts, really abusing step 1 of the quest line, I think is what's important for Shaman in most of its bad matchups if it's going to have a chance. Gaby just didn't really get one of those there. Interesting to see him moving on to the Shadow Priest here as opposed to the Celestial Druids to go up against Mage, which I would call probably a stronger matchup overall, but I guess because of Q/counter Q considerations, he's just choosing to do it this way around.
Yeah, so let's just live in the world where Gaby wins this matchup. It means that Bunnyhoppor has his own Shaman and then has his Warlock, which is Handlock, left over, and maybe he feels like he would need the Shadow Priest to just grab a win and then just rely on his Druid to do the rest against the Shaman and the Warlock.
Yeah, so we'd say Gaby wins this one, and then the Q from Bunny would probably be the Quest Shaman at that point, right? Going back into the Shadow Priest, at which point you can Q Celestial Druid into Quest Shaman, feel very good about that overall. And then the remaining counter Q for Bunny would have to be Handlock into Celestial Druid, which is a fine matchup, but not a fantastic matchup. Right. So yeah, I guess this does make a lot of sense the way that Gaby's doing it.
And while we're getting into mulligans here, and already happened for Gaby on the top, Shadow Priest is a deck that has surprised me a lot this week, and not only in Europe, not only with Gaby piloting it, but just across the board, across Grandmasters, and some of the performances on ladder as well. It really has surprised me a lot of how consistent it feels when you look at the list, and it shouldn't feel that consistent, at least to me, even though it is a very low curve deck. Just what do you make of the list now that we've gone like a sort of week into the Shadow Priest actually being played a lot across the board?
I think it's strong. It's an aggro deck with a good curve and a couple of I win cards, right? Which is kind of ideal for an aggro deck. And those I win cards being like Thrive into Mancrick's Wife, Void Touch Attendant in an unchecked Void Touch Attendant early, and then the biggest one, Mindrender Elusia, right? Which is just the ultimate I win card in this matchup. I'm convinced that no Shadow Priest player has ever played a card from their opponent's hand using Mindrender Elusia. It's just not what it's for. You just spend all your mana on playing idiots and then play Mindrender Elusia at the end of your turn, and you give your opponent no hand to play with the next turn, and that means all of your minions get to attack and kill your opponent the next turn. It's absolutely brutal. It's something that I remember right back when Elusia was announced, and we were all initially freaking out about it, and rightly so. Card has been nerfed and is still one of the best cards in the game. That's how strong that card is. I brought it up and said, I know we're all freaking out about like combo pieces and win conditions being stolen away, but can you imagine if there's ever like any kind of playable like Tempo Priest archetype, and you just drop Mindrender Elusia and just deny your opponent all chance to answer your board? And everyone was like, good joke, Tempo Priest. Yeah, that's gonna happen. Excellent stuff. Well, here we are. Who's laughing now?
You, as always. Yeah, it's interesting, right? We did see it come up now and again in the Control Priest mirrors, for example, where it would just be the times where you could build a board and then you just pass over nothing at that point.
Yeah.
We did see it the odd time, but yeah, very, very powerful. And I will say the one time you might see a Priest cast a spell is in this matchup from the Mage, because if the hand's reduced, then they can often just play even just one burn card, right? If the hand's reduced enough. So going to be a little bit tricky here for Bunnyhoppor. But again, Mage is equipped with plenty of spot removal and, a chunk of AoE in just those two fire sales. So it will be interesting to see if Gaby can repeat his performance versus Yala, where he did a great job of just managing the health, managing the board's state, just to be able to give the Mage the hardest opportunities to actually take down the board.
Yeah, and I think this is a good news, bad news situation for Gaby with the way this game started. He went second, first of all, bad news. He missed one drop, second of all, bad news. However, he's hit a Neophyte, which means Neophyte is blocking flow this turn and is now going into the Raised Dead pool forever, which is obviously good news. But then if you look at the rest of his hand and how quickly it spikes in power from here, he's going to be doing a lot very quickly with Mancrick and then into the Thrive in the Shadows, which is guaranteed to discover the wife, push that damage face, get the huge minion on board. And then any time he gets a board stuck that can attack, that Void Touched Attendant is going to be doing a ton of work.
Bunnyhoppor pushed all the way back to just ping, pass, and doesn't even kill the Neophyte this turn, which is a little bit horrendous. It also means that if he wants to Incanters next turn, a lot of the time that's still a 3 mana pass kind of turn, right? There aren't tons of 1-cost spells that he can draw. With just one draw, of course. Does miss on the Rune Orb there.
It does also mean that it lines up into his Awakening of the Phoenix turn, right? And it's just miserable. You don't want to be spending your spell damage +2 turn playing Incanter's Flow. So that means the flow from Gaby has been blocked not by 1 turn, but now by 2 entire turns. Counterspell is an interesting option in this matchup. Obviously, Gaby still has Coin right now, but there are very limited spells in Shadow Priest that they want them to do very specific roles. It's not like they have too many spells they can throw away into Counterspell, but all things considered, probably just a little bit too much mana to be playing in a matchup like this.
And I think Cone is just more consistent, right? Priest is going to make a board. That's a fact. And if they don't, you win. So make the board and then you can freeze it down, buy some time. And already I'm wondering, it feels like it's going to be very difficult for Bunny to find the time. I guess if he's ever going to flow, it's now.
Huge. That's such an incredible draw this turn.
What do you want to see here? Flow First Flame twice?
He could flow First Flame twice and trade into the Mancrick. He could also just Apexis Blast and do the same thing. He could also just choose to go Cone of Cold and soften things up with some First Flames, which would actually hit Frost and Fire on his remaining quest and allow him to preserve his Imprisoned Phoenix. Because, you know, Gaby's deck actually literally cannot deal with this minion from off board. So as long as he can stop all minions attacking. So actually, I think, you know, having seen this play, I think this is the one I prefer, and I think Bunnyhoppor saw it straight away as well.
Again, though, it is one of those win-lose moments, really, because, yeah, it's a nice clear, it's pushed Gaby back again, but Bunnyhopper's still not played that flow, which means he's doing the the noob thing of actually paying full mana for Mage cards in the deck.
Yeah, I don't know how this one really files into, like, Europe drawing flow statistics, because Bunny has drawn it both games, as expected, which, you know, we didn't really mention, because, again, it's just what happens here in the European region, but he hasn't actually cast it this game, so I don't really know how that factors in.
Yeah, now the neophyte that Gaby got from Raised Dead, another layer of problems, because at this point in the game, with flow in your opening hand, you expect a neophyte to just make your cards cost regular mana.
As opposed to his partner, baby mana.
Exactly. Which is your normal post-flow turn, so it's looking pretty rough. These neophytes have had a huge effect in the game already.
Oh, his Phoenix is just so sick, though.
Well, what if it's just flow, brain freeze the Mancrick trade?
I want my Phoenix to still be alive, but I can't have that, and it's really annoying me.
I want a discount on all my further purchases of cards, okay? And that's what Incanter's Flow gives me right now.
I demand to speak to the manager
Exactly.
immediately.
This is the Karen turn.
It's just done so much work, this game. It's such a clutch pickup early on from Bunny. And honestly, that all really comes down to the miss on the one-drop from Gaby, right? Because Bunny went first, then Gaby missed one-drop, which meant Bunny was actually weirdly the first person on board in Mage. Even though it was with a dormant minion, he got to play that Phoenix into an empty board. And then so by the time a board was developed, that Phoenix is already waking up, and Bunny's just been able to wreak absolute havoc with it.
Gaby again.
Finally, Gaby's got something going here.
Yeah, and in case you're a little bit new to this priest, the Mancrick or Enraged Mancrick is a guaranteed outcome. So, always going to happen, always part of the plan. And now we start to see, as you mentioned, right? 7 health, 5 health on board now. A little bit trickier for Bunnyhoppor to deal with, especially since that Phoenix has been put down at last.
And there's so many ways to punish an established board, right? For Gaby, if these minions do get to attack next turn, as I was saying, Wriggling Horror can buff, Void Touch Attendant can buff, Dragon Maw has the delay buff, and then of course there's the Kazakus Golem as well, which if you hit +1/+1 in this deck is usually nutty. But currently no flurries in Bunnyhoppor's hand, which means there's a good chance that some of these minions are going to get to attack this turn.
Yeah, even next turn for Gaby, if he did hit +1/+1 and play Attendant, like, it's so much damage.
Yeah.
What to do? What to do?
And you're going to have to dig. 3 mana to draw. First Flame helps a little bit.
Yeah, he's locked himself out of the Fire Sale mana, though, which has cut into a lot of his options. Wow.
Oh, it doesn't look good, does it?
No, not a good turn at all. And this is the punish turn now for Gaby. This is what he's been waiting for the entire game. The opportunity to actually attack face with some minions.
It's so tricky. Like, already I'm just staring at Benedictus Wriggling Horror, and it's weird to say play Benedictus when there are other great minions in hand, but it's that little thing in your head, right, where the wider the board is, the stronger Kazakus is, the stronger Void Attendant is, but maybe that's just me being a little bit too greedy.
You love Benedictus way too much. I've noticed this in like every Shadow Priest game that we've cast so far. It's really
true.
bad. You have to accept that, okay? It is a very bad
I know
card.
it's bad. I know it's bad. It's just, again, in this scenario where Bunnyhopper's obviously not got freeze, it's another high health minion on the board. But yeah, like I said, I have no doubts that I'm being too greedy with these suggestions when Gaby can just go for pushing the max damage now and then going for the golem after the fact. What golem was that? Oh, wow, okay.
Stealth's a very smart pick here, I think. Obviously, +2/+2 is the nuts. You know, if you have any minions being able to attack, that's just the business you're in right now. You want them to be able to attack as much as possible. But I think it's a good 2-turn setup here because Gaby understands if his minions aren't going to attack this turn, a flurry has probably been cast, right? And if a flurry has been cast, the best thing that you can then play the next turn is a stealth minion, which can only really be interacted with by the flurry that your opponent has just used.
Bunnyhopper is going to be able to clean up a good chunk of this, though. And then he ends the turn only with a 4/4. Not great, but I think the clear was much more important than the minion he got out of it. He is in this dangerous part, though, now. Gaby does not play the Void Shard, so there's no burst from hand. But these hero powers are going to start stacking up. And Bunnyhopper, I believe, is quite the distance away from his quest, right?
You're about to look very stupid, Raven. I'm sorry.
Is this the proc for Dawngrasp? Okay.
That's the proc for Dawngrasp, yeah.
I guess the flurry, yeah, I probably didn't really appreciate the flurries, right?
Yeah.
Can he make up the time? 2 3-mana fireballs, a full-costed Apexis Blast in hand means that he is a little bit limited, especially with lack of ignites being a factor in the game so far.
I mean, I think he's wildly favoured in this position. Yeah, I think we're back in that position, which is very familiar. We were talking about it right at the beginning. Gaby is in a top deck Elusia or lose situation at this point, I would say. And you see Bunny playing around that, right? Like, this is potentially the play to play around Elusia, because this way he only leaves 5 damage in his own hand, which means Elusia plus Apexis Blast will only deal 5. There wouldn't even be mana to ping at that point, so he would be able to survive it. Considering whether he really wants to dump any more cards, in the end he's going to go ahead and cycle. That's a little bit risky, but I suppose not so much because of mana considerations on the Elusia turn. Bunny's played around it, though. Bunny's played around it.
Where did he even go at this point?
I mean, obviously this way he gets to play the quest reward if he would really like to.
Yeah, and that makes the cram sessions reasonably dead, if he, or at least the one cram session now.
There is.
He plays both cram sessions. Who cares about the quest reward to a certain extent?
That's it, right?
What are the odds? It's just the same minion.
It's just game. Bunny will look at the deck list, think about what tradable opens up to him in terms of draws coming out of this, but that's just Mind Render Elusia. Yeah. Card's just toxic. Don't at me.
It's so rough. Also so insane with the stealth as well, because even if somehow, say Bunny took a different turn to an extent and got the Dawngrasp down, maybe had some more spells to remove some of the minions and so on, it just didn't matter. The lack of Incanter's flow for so long in that game delayed it just enough, and even then, Bunny had basically set up the win, right? He was secure, there was no burst, as I mentioned earlier, from the deck, there's no Void Shard, but Elusia comes out of nowhere, and you saw straight away when Gaby drew it, he knew as long as there's no crazy weird outcomes that could happen, which I don't know what those could be, then he's looking pretty safe. But these were the turns for me, honestly. Even though the Elusia, of course, won in the game, the Neophyte gave him the chance for the game to go on as long as it did, right? Because outside of that, Bunnyhoppor did get through the quest pretty quick, even without flow.
Yeah, double wife, Neophyte comes down early. It would have been an absolute stomp of a Shadow Priest game if it wasn't for the very well-engineered way that Bunny played it. with the Phoenix and picking the boards apart early and really preserving a lot of health that way. But Gaby just got hold of so many big minions and so many buffs because of those extra Mankrik's wives that he found, that he was in the end just able to push too much damage. But he was still a colossal underdog this turn. What's that, 16 cards left in his deck? So he loses the game 15 times this turn. And he found the 1 in 16 to get himself out. Okay, my bad, it was one turn later, but the point still stands. But, you know, I said Bunny's trying his best to play around it this turn by dumping all the burn from his hand, but that's kind of the point, is that you don't play around it. Like, obviously, if you just play Dawn Grasp and Cram Session that turn, you end up filling your hand up with a lot of burn, most likely, and you probably just die to the Elusia straight up. But the problem is, even if you dump your hand of all burn, Elusia still comes down, still generates a board, still minions attack face, and then you still have nothing in your hand on the following turn going back to you on the other side. So, I don't know, I think it's a very rough situation for Bunny to be in, all things considered there. I think he played it very, very well, and he just kind of had to take the beating from the Elusia.
Yeah, especially with just the impact that extra win would have made, right? It gives Bunnyhoppor much more wiggle room then to just beat this Miracle Druid in a 1 of 3 potential games at that point. So, well, you don't have to beat in one. So it's a really tough one overall. Bunnyhoppor is, of course, no surprise, going to go over to that Quest Shaman as the response, and hopefully he can get the victory there for his sake to take down this Priest, because it does feel like a bit of a nightmare. And I'm not even just talking about the Elusia draw in the last game, of course, but just in general, I feel like I've been seeing it win a lot, and I believe actually just checking out the overall win rate, it is currently sitting second, just under, well, not just under, 6% under Warlock, but still at 55.7% win rate going into today.
Pretty good. Can't really turn your nose up at that. But Bunny now does have the good matchup with the Quest Shaman coming in, which really hinges around a couple of particular cards. Canal Slogger is fantastic in the early game. Generally will chew through a couple of minions. I think there's very nice things you can do by just deliberately trading it into a 1-attack minion, right? Like if there's 3 minions on board, hit the Frazzled Freshman, because then your Canal Slogger has 3 health, and once again, Priest has nothing in their deck that really interacts with minions from off board. So that means that another minion will then have to trade into it. It's not just a hero power that will be able to take it down, but the big one, of course, is that Perpetual Flame, which is an absolute nightmare for Priest to deal with. But again, Gaby has put on an exhibition so far in terms of how to manipulate usage of Divine Shields and health totals in order to play around key removal points.
And he has got my favourite card in his opening hand, so it's all looking good. Looks like we've got a slight disconnect issue. Sure, it'll be sorted in just a second, but there you go. Perfect. Gaby's hand is looking pretty fantastic, though, with the Void Touch to the Attendant into 2 into 3. Is there any world in which Gaby skips Void Touch here and goes Coin into 2/2?
I don't like the curve too much with Wriggling Horror as the second 2-drop, just landing on 1 minion. I think it's a little bit underwhelming. I would like to play that curve if the other 2-drop was a Kultaran or something along those lines, but in this case, probably not.
Do you think it's worth it to just play it and have faith that worst case you wriggle in, best case you draw another card to play instead?
That's an argument. Yeah, I mean, I could definitely listen to that, but you know, for me, I think there's such a high density of 1-drops in your deck, right, as well as all the spells that you could potentially draw, plus a few 3-drops in there as well, that I don't think the odds are in your favor of. I think it's 2 cards specifically at that point, right? It's Kultaran and the 2/3, which I do not know the name of, that draws a card on damage.
Twilight Deceptor.
Thank you.
Chance. You're welcome. Hey, though, Bunny, not really having that great opening. He does have the Canal Slogger, of course, but just having Hero Power pass for turn 2. Obviously, he plays Quest turn 1, but nothing to even really get that Overload train going, right? Nothing really to go crazy and start building up on that board very quickly overall, because even the Spirit Alpha just feels dead. It's not a card generally you want on curve, right? It's not really a 4-mana card unless you've got Bloom, I suppose. It's something you want a little bit later on with those Overload cards. So not looking great for Bunnyhoppor here, especially if Gaby can build up this board nice and quick. He did draw Elusia. We aren't going to see it super soon, but again, we could see the fear factor of, regardless of what Bunnyhoppor has in hand, just the fact that Gaby effectively gives his minions all Wind Fury for that turn is the biggest impact here.
Up and try and decent draw. Not entirely convinced it's appropriate for this turn, but it's so easy just to tunnel on the fact that see a void touched, kill a void touched, right? Like, it's so tempting to do that, but I kind of agree with this, just playing a spider tank here instead. Bloom looks pretty great with Spirit Alpha in hand, actually. And now the Wriggling Horror starts to represent all of that extra value that Gaby was looking for.
Yeah, interesting choices again, though, right? He can keep the Mankrik high health to dodge the Eternal Eternal Flame. God damn.
Is this funny? Yeah.
And he could trade in the 2/3 and hero power to just remove the sorceress off the board, or he could just do the value trade, go face, and just hope he doesn't have it. It's a tough call because of exactly what that minion on the right is, right?
Just close your eyes and give me your hand. We already did it. I already did it yesterday. We're not going to run.
Don't do it again.
Back.
I don't want to.
You think I am Lorinda running the same bits for the last 35 years? Jeez.
It hurts, but I think in this position I would make the 2/3 trade. Otherwise, it's just a nightmare if it comes down, right?
Again, this is just Gaby's dedication to playing around the outs, right? He really does not want to get hit by a Perpetual Flame here, and that's the only play he can make to play around that. I would argue that this leaves him a tiny bit weaker to some other plays. You know, just Canal Slogger on curve, for example, is actually pretty decent here, right? Deals with the only real major threat in play, and because of the way he's ended up doing it, not taking the value trade, so you could certainly present that argument.
I actually quite like the Canal Slogger this turn, because it might even open up more options with that Spirit Alpha next turn instead, because right now it's pretty underwhelming. But maybe it's good enough, right? Because it is still 2 Overload that he could play if he played the Novice Zapper.
Oh, yeah! Oh, I love it!
Like it.
Called it out right at the start, and then was somehow suggesting doing the stupid thing of trading into the 4/5. Yeah, you love to see it.
How does Perpetual Flame kill the Mankrik now?
Awkward turn again for Bunny. Lack of spell last turn is really punishing him, but I think he wanted to set this up for a big swing turn potentially, right? With the Spirit Alpha, Lightning Bloom, Serpent Shrine Portal all coming down in the same turn here. But once again, we're approaching territory where if Bunny doesn't get hold of the board soon, that Elusia in Gaby's hand is going to make an absolute mess of his entire game plan.
Yeah, I was even looking at whether the turn, I mean, how does it work out? 6, 4, 5. Yeah, I was even looking at whether the turn was actually just Marsh Spawn Pass, and then he could have Spirit Alpha, Bloom, Serpent Shrine.
It's got to be the turn, though, I imagine. 2 out of 3 on step 1, which means he can play Lightning Bloom and unlock it immediately.
Yep.
Then has follow-ups with the Lightning Bolt and the Marsh Spawn. And I think this is just going to come just in time, right? One more turn to actually get this board swing, and Bunny would have been in serious trouble because he'd get hit by the Elusia on the other side alongside the Void Touched Attendant, and that would probably be GG at this point. But since he's grabbing board control now, that Elusia is just going to be a very bad card overall, unless Gaby can use it, for example, to now snipe that Perpetual Flame from Bunny's hand and actually use that to fight back against the board state.
Share your thoughts with the class.
And it's the plan. That's what he's going to do, yeah. Except that playing his whole hand out just won't even beat down this board. Never mind anything else. So he's going to take the risk there. Drops Elusia, and we can see that spell damage Perpetual Flame in most outcomes does a good job here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Correct decision.
literally nothing left there, and that means Bunnyhoppor is going to take the victory. He needs to make his mind up as to whether he wants to leave that room or stay in it. I'm not sure what was going on there, but he's going to grab the win there. So again, the back and forth is continuing. He gets the win with the Shaman, which means Gaby now has his Miracle Druid left to not only beat Shaman, which I think is a fairly confident matchup for the Druid, but also take down the Handlock, which can be a lot trickier.
I'll let you know what happened there. Bunny, being the seasoned veteran of Grandmasters that he is, knows that he didn't want to leave too soon and miss his little 3 seconds of camera time on the victory portrait. Gaby, the amateur, showed you on the other side. He made a little gesture at the end of his Game 2 win. He did it too early because it was during the transition to his full screen camera. He doesn't know what's up. I'll give you a free tip for everyone at home. Count. After your opponent explodes, count 1, 2, 3, then do whatever you need to do, and it will be perfect timing every time.
Maybe less time rank 1 on multiple servers and more time practicing your media training. I don't know. But yeah, this is the miracle list here from Gaby. Of course, a little bit different than a lot of the token versions of Anaconda you see. This is all focused on the celestial alignment there, with Anaconda and Gadgets and Auctioneer providing big backup and big crazy turns. And honestly, there is a Cthulhu there. It's there as a backup plan, I guess. But really, the turns are often so big when you play the Anaconda after Celestial that your opponent literally just does not have the ability to respond and therefore concedes.
That is most likely the case, yes. And this matchup is an interesting one for sure. Those, I was saying earlier, basically every bad matchup, the way that Quest Shaman gets around it is with some kind of nutty Diligent Note Taker Lightning Bloom opening. That's absolutely the case here as well, because you want to try as best as possible to start getting 6, 9 damage on board by turn 3 at the absolute latest, so you can start pressuring. If you're not able to do that, Druid just has so much time that even with a no ramp hand, they'll get to Celestial quite safely under most circumstances. And then this matchup also has the additional kicker that this is a Shaman deck built around Overload, and they only really have 1, maybe 2 turns with an Overdraft where they can unlock those mana crystals. And if they don't do that, any overloaded turn can be immediately punished by Celestial Alignment on the other side, and that means Shaman just straight up misses their turn. Yeah,
in a very basic form, if you play against Celestial Druid, you are an aggro deck. Regardless of what 30 cards are in your deck, you need to be an aggro deck, no matter what. And it's one of the reasons why that Handlock, maybe we see a little bit later on, is tough, because they do have the ability to drop big, awkward minions in the early game. But we'll see if it comes to it. For now, it's going to be Bunnyhoppor on this Quest Shaman once again. Gaby on that Miracle Druid in. Speaking of miracles, that's at least 50% a good hand.
Yeah, not bad at all. On Gaby's side, with the Nature Studies into Overgrowth, it'll give him a very smooth curve through the early game. It's just turn 2 that will be a small problem in this situation.
Was that a full keep from Gaby?
I think it was, yeah.
Ooh. Oh, I didn't expect him to keep so much ramp. So much of the Innovate and Bloom. I thought he was going to throw at least one of those.
Double Diligent Note Taker start here for Bunny as well. Creates some really interesting worlds where, you can go Quest on 1, Note Taker on 2, and then in the no Lunar Eclipse world, you can then play the other Note Taker on 3, hopefully draw a Lightning Bloom by that time, and you're off to the races, right?
Yeah, really is the extreme kind of opening. It's either 2 almost unlimited mana and overload cards, or 2 River Crocs. So we'll have to see how Bunnyhoppor goes for this.
Oh, takes the Fungal Fortunes.
On a minute.
Very nice. He just didn't play his Quest on 1? Okay, sure.
Can you provide any sort of explanation for that?
I will confess that one has me stumped.
I'm trying to be
never seen that done before.
I'm like, come on, Raven. Look, pull this out the bag. Think of it, whatever.
Oh, no, this is it. This is it. It's so smart. It's the Marsh Spawn, right? He just wants to play the Marsh Spawn on 3. Really, really obvious when you stop and think about it for like...
I knew there'd be something.
Yeah.
Couldn't get there. It's
Yeah.
because I was staring at the diligent note takers and be like, this causes literally
Yeah, me too.
no.
Yeah, I was super tunneled on just going like note taker into note taker and just like trusting that you got there. But this makes sense because this allows you to dig for the spell, right? You play the Quest on 2, and then you play the Mushborn on 3, and then that finds you Lightning Bloom or Feral Spirit or whatever you want. It's a really, really smart play. It took me a second.
He is good,
there.
Bunnyhoppor, isn't he?
Yeah, genuinely not a play I have seen before, but yeah, once you stop and look at it for a few seconds, does make a ton of sense.
Meanwhile, Gaby's gaining mana in every which way possible. Now there's double Nourish, double Innovate, Bloom, a Gadget Zan. He's only a couple of cards away from just simply winning the game, and that might sound like an exaggeration, but it's not.
Literal.
It's just not.
Yeah, and this is the scariest turn, honestly, for Quest Shaman, I think, in this matchup, because you know not to play overload cards into turn 7, or into the 7 mana turn for Druid on the other side, right? But these are the scary turns because you can't sit around just not overloading forever. But if you do that, then an overload this turn, they're very likely just be able to have Innovate into Celestial Alignment in hand, right? And then you get hard punished for playing, for example, Feral Spirit this turn. So I think there is a way you can go about it with Quest Shaman, where if you get enough Spider Tanks in the early curve, as Bunny has here, you can just keep playing Spider Tanks for a while, and then the first time you overload 3 times in the same turn to play around that situation, right? And I think that's probably what Bunnyhoppor is going to end up going with here.
Yeah, I really like this actually because, one, it's quite difficult to kill outside of what exactly more. It just doesn't really die. And even if there is a Celestial turn, he will then have Feral Spirit to go super wide, super quick with that 1 mana.
Mm-hmm.
What to do?
Gaby might choose to play this hand as a pure ramp hand. Yeah, actually very, very much in favor of this. He can now go Lightning Bloom with the Feral Rage to be able to take down the 2/5. And he can just start trying to dominate, just straight up with the Cenarian Ward, right? He can even use Auctioneer to cycle the deck to find his eventual Celestial Alignment that way. But yeah, I really like the plan here from Gaby, just recognizing what's in the hand and saying, okay, I know I'm the Celestial deck, I know I'm supposed to destroy my mana, but I'm actually a very good ramp Druid as well when it comes down to it. So just choosing to play out with his deck in that way for a few turns.
Yeah, and he does have the backup. It's not like that was his best defensive play overall. He has Heart of Cthulhu, which deals with most Shaman boards, honestly. Like, there's only a couple of minions that really dodge that 3 damage total, and he still has hero power after that as well.
Yeah, you could almost argue that the Spirit Alpha was not a mandatory kill, right, for that reason as well, because he has the heart to be able to follow it up. He'd be able to just sweep down the board after the fact anyway, but I think by doing it this way probably enables him to get a bit greedier with his Heart of Cthulhu overall.
Could you repeat that?
I'm now going to pick up Storm Strike, just play a Diligent Note Taker out on board. Little bit risky, because of course he can't guarantee that the spell burst will go off. There are a few cards that deal with this.
With that draw, could suggest that you're supposed to rip the heart this turn and then just hero power down one of the spider tanks, just to soften up the board as much as possible. Say, you know, no big payoff with the Diligent Note Taker, and now this turn, obviously, we have Solar Cenarian set up on Gaby's side, which means he should be able to dominate the board in most scenarios unless he seriously low rolls on the 8 drops, which is becoming more and more possible with each passing expansion.
Yeah, I think the big deal, actually, maybe just as much as the 8 drops, is the armor, because Bunnyhoppor's been pressuring a little bit. This hit as well, going to take him down to 18. And there is those burst outs, right, for the Shaman that can just get there, but with that additional armor, as well as the minions, it probably gives Gaby enough time to maybe even draw with this Nourish. Or just draw a Fungal or something, obviously.
Right. Pop off with Auctioneer, whatever it ends up being.
Yeah, because he'll be able to start Innovate, right? Which isn't bad.
Here we go. As mentioned previously, triple overload this turn. Hasn't overloaded for the whole game, and then drops the 3 overload cards in a single turn, just making sure he does not end any given turn overloaded to play around that Celestial Alignment as best he can. But it's not going to be Alignment, it's going to be Solar Cenarion, as we expected this turn. Gaby just needs to not whiff hard on the 8 drops here. That's not whiffing. That's kind of a whiff. That's when I talk about how this expansion has lowered the power of 8 drops a little bit. That's one of the culprits right there, but I think he'll take a 5/7 taunt any day of the week.
Yeah, especially the fact it death rattles into lifesteal, right? Which is a huge deal as well. Like, Bunny can't really ignore the 5/5 after that. It has to be dealt with in some respect.
Bunny looks like he is considering the charge call this turn, but obviously since he's been holding off on overload since most of the game, I believe that is only a 4 drop at the moment. Get up to a 5 with the Novice Zapper.
The storm is in me.
There is little time.
Not great.
A charming composition.
Suppose this is as good a time as any to offer an official retraction.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Go on, that's what you can say.
Only more deadly.
So he could have picked Baron's Blacksmith there. I was working out whether he could have struck his own Baron's Blacksmith.
Okay, sure.
The spell damage pushed it too far, right?
Yeah, there's too much spell damage in play. But yeah, I was going to say, offering an official retraction. I said early on in week 1, I think, that 5 drops looked better than 6 drops because of the high roll potential that you had with like Earth Elemental, Raz, all that stuff. I actually did the numbers hard way, since a lot of great tools like HS Lookup have gone away, forcing us to do this manually again now. And actually, I think the big kicker is just how many more 5 drops there are than 6 drops, and there are good high rolls on 6 as well, which means you're going to hit those high rolls on 6 more often because there are less of them. And there's no class weighting on Discover anymore, which would have changed the factor. If class weighting still exists, I'd be arguing for 5s all over again, because the good 5s are Shaman 5s, but there's no such weighting anymore. You're just as likely to hit neutrals, and the neutral 5s are pretty underwhelming overall.
Right. Yeah, though, it looks like Bunnyhoppor's just going to commit to a double Lightning Bolt. The main reason for this is just to defend as much of his board as possible and try and just say that this has got to be enough, because as often is the case as Quest Shaman, he is pretty much working off whatever he draws next off the top of his deck. Looking at all face by the looks of things.
Yeah, this last 3-2 is certainly having a little think about what it wants to do with its life. Its damage is the way to go, but it's looking very much like Gaby's going to take over this one. Yeah, total power in play. And fungal as well, yeah.
Okay, because the quest is still there so late into the game, actually ended up being okay for Bunnyhoppor with the entrap.
Ooh!
Landslide.
That's insane!
Just a lot of damage. 2 mana, deal 8.
I mean, deal 16, right? I guess it deals 14 by killing 2 7 health minions.
Sure.
Absolutely insane.
If only you could corrupt the dunk tank, though.
I know.
That thing goes phase.
Yeah. With Heart already down, this is an extremely difficult board for Gaby to deal with. He's looking in real trouble now. Bunny has engineered this matchup very, very well. Has to be said, of course, Gaby is playing a alignmentless game. That was a hard word to get out in one piece. Which is obviously going to impact his win rate quite significantly. But I think, many a lesser player would have folded over and died to this hand from Gaby still. I think Bunny has engineered this very nicely.
Yeah, locked him into a situation where alignment won't be enough, and you can see Gaby there throwing, what was that? Yeah, Anaconda and Malagos. So that was 3 mana, draw 1 card at that point there.
And it killed
a single minion.
nothing.
That's going to be the concede. Bunnyhoppor takes the victory there. No alignment for Gaby, and ending the turn with a not only terrible fungal fortunes, but also the eye just couldn't kill anything. Too much damage on the board, and Bunny just about managed to keep up enough pressure throughout that game. Pretty impressive, and Bunnyhoppor is the player to put a stop to Gaby and hand him his first loss as a Grandmaster.
Yeah, absolutely so. And obviously, I think Bunny is a very capable, very fitting player to be doing that as well. And I do just want to once again just point out how beautifully Bunnyhoppor played that matchup. Obviously, a couple of strokes of luck with the landslide there. But a couple of things that I called out at the start, managing overload very carefully. Like, don't overload, don't overload, don't overload. Overload all in one turn so that you unlock again. Bunny did that perfectly. And then also a couple of things that I was nowhere near, like Quest on 2 to activate the 3-4 on turn 3. You know, Bunny showing what a incredibly capable player he was. There was so many small details here and there in that performance from Bunny, particularly in that last match, which I think is really the hallmark of him as a player, is that he just gets the little things right so often. And in the end, yes, a little bit fortunate on a couple of discovers for Bunny. Yes, a little bit unfortunate on the final draw there for Gaby, but it would also be disingenuous to say that, you know, all the great success that Gaby has had has not come with a little bit of luck on his side as well, right? That's just how Hearthstone works.
Right.
You have to combine a little bit of good fortune with a lot of skill, and I think, you know, all of these players are fantastic at doing that. But once again, just round of applause for a clinic from Bunnyhoppor, really. It was a fantastic series from his part.
Yeah, really smooth play overall, and that means he is going to be our first finalist this week.